My name is Brandt Dixson. My connection with this is I was a security guard at the particular event where the murder happened. Well, the guy that hired me for that particular event, I had worked for before. I was working with him through some comedy clubs up and down Hollywood Boulevard, and
What were you assigned to primarily? What were you doing?
Well, you kind of rotating posts because at the beginning I was in the front when the people first started coming up, and then later on as the party, progressed, I was inside, upstairs, like in the back there.
And the person that hired me knew that I was with the Nation is kind of how I got the spot in the first place. At that time, I was a registered active member of the Nation of Islam. I wasn't on the Nation of Islam security detail that night. I was working for a separate company, but I was a registered active member of the Nation of Islam. Our security is more detailed in their security, though. We're highly trained. We don't carry weapons of any kind. We have done security on the likes of Michael Jackson. We've done security on, Prince has used us for security. Athletes have used us as security. We do events all the time. Even to this day, we do security. So, the training in the Nation of Islam is a highly detailed training as far as to what we're doing, how we're trained.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some of Biggie's friends remember seeing Nation checking people in.
Yeah, Nation of Islam did security on the event as well.
During the course of the evening there, did you see any Muslims with our security?
Yeah, there was some Muslims out there.
Were there?
They were doing security for the place.
For who?
For the vibe party. The FOY was security there. That's the Fruit of Islam, that's the FOY people.
I'm sorry?
That's the name of them, Fruit of Islam, the FOY, they do security. They were doing security for the Clippers that night. There's a lot of them out there.
That night, did you, at the vibe party at the museum, did you see any Muslims?
Mm-hmm.
How many did you see?
Whole bunch.
Whole bunch?
Yeah.
Right before he was shot, you saw?
And when we came in,
When
we
you
came in, it was at the door. Come out, it was at the door.
So you're not confused, you saw more than just one guy in a bow tie, you said there were several guys that appeared to look like Muslims at this vibe party right before Biggie was shot?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it appeared that they were working security for somebody, right?
Yeah.
There were some of the brothers that were there in the suits and the bow ties, doing the search procedures. Those are the ones that were more or less making sure nobody got in with any weapons that weren't supposed to have weapons. But I was there in a from a separate security company. I was at the front door. The parking lot and where they pull the cars up is right in front of the front door. So we had to go out and control from the paparazzi to the regular fans to the celebrities to make sure that the celebrities got in, without too much incident. Someone would stop and pose for pictures or even sign an autograph and like that. But we were there to basically control that and make sure that, nothing went out of the ordinary.
Did you see Biggie and Bad Boy when they showed up?
No, I didn't see them when they showed up. I saw them there, but I didn't see when they got there. Once they tell us that it's over, we have to announce to the people, okay, we need you guys to move to the parking lot, move to your cars, and, we need you to exit, and we'll kind of, shovel the people out towards the parking lot and out towards the exits.
So now, we're right here in pulling out the parking garage. The kid from the Nation of Islam, I got the kid in the blue. He stays right there. He had a bluish green tie on, bow tie on, white shirt, a blue suit.
What color blue? Like dark, light?
No, it wasn't dark. It was like a
It's not real dark.
something like that. But a little light.
Medium blue.
Yeah, like with a bluish green tie. Yeah, the white handkerchief in his hand. He did like this. So they got the fucking Nation of Islam out here? Oh my God.
I remember I heard one of the Puff security said that one of the FOIs was looking inside their truck. So he was looking inside of the truck. And he said,
At what point?
when we was leaving, they said he had a conflict with them a while ago. He don't like them personally. So that's what he said. That's why he said he noticed them.
We were put back in the front door to kind of keep the crowd controlled for the people trying to get out and trying to control the parking lot. And the brothers that I saw were out there selling the Final Call newspapers to the people. And that is where I saw the brothers. I knew them, I greeted them, and they knew me, you know, just from being out there. We greeted each other. They were dressed suit and bow tie, and, you know, they had the newspapers in their hand, and you could see them talking to the people, you know, trying to get them to give either donations or buy the paper, or, you know, however they were trying to get the money from the people that were there. So that's what the Nation of Islam does as far as the final calls are concerned. They get you can sell them the final call, or you can just get donations from people. The one that stuck out in my mind was a brother who had kind of a electric blue kind of suit on. And I noticed it, and I kind of remember it because I remember saying that I wanted to get a suit like that. So yeah, I remember talking to the brother. I remember seeing him there.
Do you remember anything about what you talked about, or what maybe what you would have talked about?
Well, I was still doing security, so our conversation wasn't long at all. It was, you know, we give each other the greeting, you know, Salaam alaikum, brother, good to see you. How you doing out here, soldier? You know, that kind of thing. And he was like, oh, what you doing here? I was like, yeah, I'm doing security on the event tonight. He was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I said, I'll see you out here with the papers, those kind of conversations. And then after that, he went on about his, and I went on about mine.
And that guy was handing out papers?
Yes, sir.
So here's what's interesting is Eugene Deal, who was Puffy's bodyguard that night, he says they're out, the vehicles have been brought around, they're getting ready to leave, and Puff and Big are hanging out, talking to fans, taking pictures, whatever. And he says, Deal says he's standing near Puffy's Suburban, and he said a guy in a blue suit approached him, Nation of Islam guy, approached the vehicle, and he said he had a white handkerchief in his hand. And Deal, for whatever reason, was concerned about this guy, and like he was getting too close. And he says he kind of pulled his shirt up and revealed, you know, hey, I got a gun, and the guy like backed off.
Okay, now I can say that if a person is with the Nation of Islam, like I say, we don't carry weapons. So him having a handkerchief in his hand is, you know, I don't know why he would have it there. It may have been the one that he may have had in his lapel or for whatever reason. But, you know, him getting close is more or less trying to either sell a newspaper or get a donation from the people, you know, because protocols, even on a regular day when we sell papers, we're out in traffic and we approach people that are in their cars, maybe at a stoplight. So there's no threat to it, you know, especially if he had a paper in his hand. Now, I don't know that particular incident, if he did or not, but that's how we do. We would approach people, you know, in their cars, and they would know who we are simply because of the way that we're dressed. So, you know, if he did approach him and he didn't want him close, he really didn't even have to show the gun. All he would have had to do is be like, okay, not, you know, and the brother would have backed off. But, you know, that's as far as that would go.
And just for the purposes of this video, I'm not saying that for sure. I don't know who Eugene Deal saw. And I'm not saying for sure that it was the same guy in the blue suit that you saw. I just think they make it sound like he's the only guy.
Oh, yeah, no.
Which is not true.
No, not at all. I mean, there was nothing particularly, you know, that stood out about him. I guess he was probably about maybe 6 feet, brown skin, like say clean shaven, clean cut. I can't remember if he had a mustache or not. I can't remember that. But yeah, there was nothing too distinguishable about him for me to be able to tell you, oh, like he had a scar on his left cheek or anything like that. Like a fade. I believe he had waves, and, you know, because that's another protocol of the nation, is to be clean cut, keep your hair cut at all times, you know, clean and neat.
There was a this hotel nearby on La Cienega called the Nico, and the Nico would hire security people like you for celebrities and VIPs that would stay there.
Right.
And did you know anything about that?
I know about it. I didn't do any particular celebrity details that night, but I had done some of that in the past. So yeah.
You mentioned a guy named Ishmael earlier.
Yes.
So Ishmael was someone who would be hired by the Nico.
Yeah.
For security people.
Yeah.
He claimed that he worked for the Nation of Islam Security Agency, Inc.
Right.
What is that?
That's the name of the security portion of the Nation of Islam. We had a security company, and that was the name of it.
Interesting, because it's very possible, because I think you may have said back then, and of course it's been so many years, that you said that the guy that you talked to, the two guys, one in the blue suit and his friend, they had worked security the night before at the Soul Train for Nico, the Hill Nico.
Right.
So they say they had done so far. Yeah, they were doing security on the Soul Train Award and at the hotel that a lot of celebrities were staying at, the Nico.
At the Nico.
And this is right in front of the doors.
Right.
They pulled the Suburbans right up.
Right.
There, right. There's the steps, and then there they are, right at the curb there.
Yeah.
In the garage.
I remember that because I was standing because like you say, they're right in front of the door, and there's steps you have to go up to get to the front door. I was standing at the top of the steps when I see the brother over here with the newspapers, and I'm like, "Assalamu alaikum." He give me the greeting, "Assalamu alaikum, brother, how you doing?" Yeah. You know, I see you out here with the papers, and he goes on back on about his business with the papers. So, you know, that's a typical thing, especially at an event that's that big with all those celebrities. That's normal. You know, those are more or less big nights for us as far as being able to get donations and get the paper sold to the people. And, you know, because sometimes they don't even want the paper. They, like I say, you have supporters of the nation that'll be like, "No, I don't want the paper, but here's a little something, here's 10, 20, 50, we've got $100 bills," and, you know, depends. But yeah, that's a typical thing, especially at that time. That's a typical thing. Yeah, Shaheed was there. If I remember right, Shaheed was there doing his personal security on Mustafa, which is Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's son. And when he comes in town, Shaheed and him and maybe one or two other brothers are on his particular personal security when he's in town.
And for people who don't know, who is Shaheed?
Shaheed is a ranking officer in the Nation of Islam. Or he was, he's deceased now. But yeah, he was a ranking officer in the Nation of Islam.
I think he was referred to as a captain.
Yes, sir. Where in the Nation of Islam, we have a military structure. So we have captains and lieutenants and like that. And Shaheed was a captain. Shaheed is about 6'6", maybe 6'5", 6'6", light skin. I mean, his stature is he's hard to miss. Any occurrence with a registered member of the Nation of Islam would definitely be known by someone, especially in the ranking of Shaheed. He would know before anybody, and he would pass it down to those necessary to know what was going on. So any kind of, and you know, and the Nation of Islam is really as vast as we are a tight-knit community. So if this was to happen on the East Coast, the brothers on the West Coast would know as well. So it's a tight-knit community. So any type of occurrence like this, especially one as big as this, we would definitely know. The Nation of Islam does its own internal investigations into any misdealings with the registered members. They have their own laws, their own consequences to, like I say, to whatever the infraction is. Like I say, it could go from a 90-day suspension to a complete removal from the Nation of Islam completely. They would get as much information as they could from the law enforcement. Law enforcement would get as much information as they could from the nation, and there would be a collaboration. The Nation of Islam definitely believes in innocent until proven guilty. So our investigation would not be put you out until we find out what happens. It would be, okay, until we find out what happens, we don't have any reason to believe, what these outside sources are saying, because the Nation of Islam goes by a phrase, and it's actually scriptural, that says if a non-believer brings you information, look deeply into it unless you cause harm to somebody in ignorance. So we have to investigate on our own, and we have investigative teams. I would say no. Nobody here that resembles the guy that I talked to that night.
Can you hold that up?
No, I've never seen him before.
Can you show us the picture? Yeah, so that's a guy by the name Poochie. He was a gang member. He was an enforcer for one of the Piru blood gangs.
Okay.
They were around Death Row Records at the time.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I've never seen him before.
Okay.
Like, it looked like a suit to you?
Yeah.
Like what?
Lighter color, like a lighter color.
Like what shade of blue are you talking about? Like,
Not even
look at
blue.
some of the blues around here.
Not even blue.
What was
I say more gray.
More gray?
Yeah.
A darker gray or lighter? A light gray?
Gray. Okay. Usually Nation of Islam, they go in,
They're in pairs.
Right, yeah, I know.
Or they're there in a, there's a lot of,
I know about them very well, and that's why I was like, bow tie suit, was that to throw me off, was that to, I don't know.
This is going to be like speculation, but if you were going to commit a crime, does it make sense that you would dress up
No.
as...
It doesn't make sense. Especially knowing from the inside out how the investigations go, it wouldn't make sense to dress up like a member of the nation unless you were simply trying to frame somebody or the Nation of Islam itself. Like anybody. I mean, if I was going to commit a crime like that, of course I would want to be in some kind of disguise to where I wouldn't be recognized. And of course they're going to say, okay, this dude dressed up in a suit and a bow tie, he must be a Muslim. And at the time, there are people out there who don't like the Nation of Islam. So they're going to put the Nation of Islam out there, like I say, to frame them, to make it look like, oh, the nation is out here being a gang. They out here killing people, with all of this positive talk that they're doing. They out here killing people to put a bad light on the nation. So, that would be a reason if I was going to do it. But to know from the inside out how the Nation of Islam operates, it really wouldn't make any sense, other than all that I can think of is trying to frame the Nation of Islam into doing something like that.
Eugene Deal said that when he interacted with this guy, he didn't think he was actually from the nation. He thought that he just said there's a way of greeting.
Right.
Yeah, and then he didn't act like a Muslim.
He didn't act like a Muslim?
Yeah, because when he looked at me and stuff like that, usually a Muslim say,
Hey,
what's up, my brother? How
he
you
greet
doing,
you or
my
something,
brother?
right?
Something like that.
He never did.
He never greeted. And so your opinion, do you think it moved? No. My opinion? Because it's
well, the way of greeting in not just the Nation of Islam, but the religion of Islam, period, is we use it in the Arabic language and we say Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be upon you. We would, give each other a hug and kind of go cheek to cheek on each side, depending on, what kind of situation we're in. Sometimes it's not, protocol to do that, but, that's the first thing you would say once you saw especially another registered member, that you would know, oh, Assalamu alaikum, brother. There are all kind of gestures. You can give the heart gesture, you can, Assalamu alaikum, or like I said, give the handshake and the cheek to cheek on each side. But our protocols are so detailed that we have questions that we ask, okay, what mosque do you go to? Who are you? And, what's your name? And we have protocols to be able to tell if you really are with us or if you're not. Because we can't stop anybody from wearing a suit and a bow tie. But, there are things that we can see by the way that you do things that, okay, you're not with the nation. I've encountered people trying to infiltrate the Nation of Islam security to try to pose as Nation of Islam security, whether it's to give the Nation of Islam a bad name or, like I said earlier, to just try to get into somewhere where they don't belong. So those are the kind of things that we're trained on to be able to see and investigate and, weed out the ones who don't belong there. We've heard about not only gang members, but police officers dressing up as Nation of Islam members and causing beefs between different gangs. We've heard about the gang members dressing up as Nation of Islam brothers and robbing people in their homes. And, we would do, like I say, our own internal investigation, and we'd have our own internal protocols put in place to, find out who it was and deal with them accordingly.
Okay, so this is the home video shot from across the street. You can hold that up. There they are, loading up to go.
Mm-hmm.
They running and say, wait, hold up. Street. Zoom in. That's how I feel. That's Biggie Neal. That is Biggie Neal. Y'all get down. That is Biggie Neal. Somebody got shot. Y'all get down. Raptor, get down. Biggie Neal. Raptor, when I busted your face.
How does it feel to see that again?
Wow, does kind of bring back some memories. Yeah, it's I do remember that. I do remember hearing the shots, and everybody kind of got to scrambling, and like I say, about maybe 20, 30 minutes later, they came and got me, and we went to the hospital. When he got shot, I actually went to the hospital. Because he knew that there was going to be questions that were going to be asked of the security. So we went to the hospital, and we were going to go inside, but from all of the people that were there, the police department was, not letting anybody in. And I think the family members requested that nobody be let in. So they were stopping people right at the emergency room doors. So that's as far as we got. Had to be about close to 50, 60 people out there. Really chaos. A lot of people, milling around, and you saw Puffy and a lot of the artists and celebrities that knew what happened were there. So police was all around. They kind of had the crowd control because it got kind of chaotic right out in front of the emergency room. I do remember seeing Faith Evans there. I remember seeing Puffy there. I was there when they announced him being there. You hear the screams out of the hospital room and everything, so.
How long were you at the hospital for, do you remember, roughly?
Maybe an hour or so. Maybe about an hour, probably.
And then do you find out Biggie, what was the reaction outside?
Oh, everybody was, screaming and crying and sad. And, it even upset me a little bit. And, because I was, like I say, I'm with the nation and I hate to see people killed, over innocent people just hurt for no reason. It kind of upset me. And, but people were crying and couldn't believe it, were in a state of shock that something like that would happen. And,
What did you hear anybody at the hospital talking about the shooting itself, like describing what they saw or anything like that?
Well, what I heard at the hospital was that one of the cars in their caravan had kind of driven up a little bit from where the car where Biggie was in. And at the time where he was kind of driven a little further up is when whoever it was that came and shot at Biggie, that's when they came up and shot Biggie. And because people were talking about, oh, that bodyguard's gonna be fired, and they were like, why was he not in the car with Biggie? And why are the bodyguards and the principal, which is what you call the main people that you're bodyguarding, why would they not be in the same car? The people didn't understand why you would do that. And then he drove, like I say, I don't know if it was that the car that Biggie and them wearing got caught at a light or something, but he kind of drove up a little, and that's when the shooters came up and shot Biggie. That was the talk at the time. I was actually back working at the comedy club that the person that I was doing security for, I was working there, and I think one of the nights after it was over, he told me that the police wanted to interview me about, that particular night, and I got interviewed and, answered a few questions about what I saw and like that. So, yeah, I do remember that. And they showed me a sketch of a man in had the suit and the bow tie sketch. It was a bus sketch, but he had the suit and the bow tie on and like that. So, yeah.
Will you be able to say if that was the guy or not from the sketch?
From the sketch, no. No, it was a pretty rough sketch. I mean, it looked like just a typical, anybody could be in the suit and the bow tie. So, yeah, it wasn't really anything definitive I could say from that.